Okay, welcome back to Color Finders segment 3, episode 2. Now, this segment we are going to talk more about Montreal, where Fabri is from. As you can see, it's on the Google map. The pin there is Montreal. Down there is New York. New York is like what, 7 hours drive, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, driving to Toronto is like
another six hours. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Toronto is more on population is more on the Asian people.
Well, Toronto. Yeah. Well, Montreal is in a province, in a Canadian province called Quebec, which is the majority of people living in Quebec are French speaking, and Toronto, which is I think the biggest Canadian city, in Montreal is the second biggest, I think. But Toronto is in another province called Ontario, and there's a huge Asian population in Toronto. There's quite a lot of Asians as well in Montreal, but not as much as in Toronto or even Vancouver.
But Montreal is like the second biggest city that speak French. Why?
Yeah. Why? Because that
after Paris.
Yeah, yeah. Because Quebec was once part of actually a French colony.
Oh.
Yeah. Actually, French arrived in North America before the English. So yeah,
okay.
For a number of years, what's now northeastern Canada was part of France. It was actually called at the very beginning New France, Nouvelle France.
Okay.
Yeah. And so for that reason, still, nowadays, the vast majority of people living there are speaking French. Yeah.
So after French, there is secondary most speaking is English.
Yeah, in Montreal. Well, Montreal is quite not 100% bilingual, but there's quite a huge English speaking population. So it's a I would say, in practical terms, it's a bilingual city. You could live in English in Montreal without speaking French. And
so you can speak French and English.
Yeah.
Italian.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay, like I Google search a bit. Like the Montreal is like the cultural city of Canada.
Yes, it is.
And then the Rolling Stone magazine also said that this is the new hotbed of the music.
Well, yeah, I can. Yeah, it's. I don't know if it's really true because I do live there, but I can see. Yeah, there's a very huge music. Well, there's a very huge art community in general, but music scene is quite something. It's quite well developed.
Yeah, I read that like the art scene is more like the more traditional, like classical music, dance, theater, something like that, right? Or about the contemporary and the avant-garde stuff?
No, I think there's a lot of avant-garde things going on, especially in music and in dance, theater as well. But the music scene is quite, especially this maybe last 10 years. I know that the music scene in Montreal has attracted quite a lot of attention worldwide because of certain labels and certain bands. Constellation Records is quite
how I
well
get
known.
to know Montreal.
Yeah, Godspeed You Black Emperor and all those bands and
Arcade Fire.
Yeah, Arcade Fire as well, but they're more pop, I think, right now. They're very
they
huge.
Used to be indie.
Yeah, at the very beginning, and actually the record, Food Soon's record, was recorded at Hotel du Tango, which is the Constellation Records
the studio, and the sound engineer who worked with us, Howard Billerman, was Arcade Fire's original drummer. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he got
now your
replaced.
records can sell more.
Bring more here. Big One can help you.
Yeah. But yeah, music is quite, and as I told you before, I've always been, since I moved to Montreal in early 90s, I've been involved in the music scene. Mostly improv, experimental music scene. There's quite a lot of interesting labels. Ambiance Magnétique, Oral, Alienate, that doesn't exist anymore, but still.
Okay.
And so it's there's a lot of venues.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite easy to play. There's a lot of rehearsal spaces and recording studios and
Like
stuff. And
the venue, is it like they divided like this venue is mostly for experimental music, or this one is for like metal music or pop music?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same. I think it's the same in every corner in the world.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. But there's quite a lot of there's a network of venues dedicated to improv, experimental music. One of them, I think, the most famous one, it's called Casa del Popolo, and it's run by Moro, who's one of a bass player for Godspeed You Black Emperor, and it's a very nice place. There's music every evening.
Mm-hmm.
And they even during summertime in usually it's June every year, they organize a very nice festival called Suoni per il Popolo, which is growing from since maybe more than 10 years now, and it has become one of the main North American improv avant-garde festivals. Yeah. No, it's really of course, not everything is I'm not describing some sort of paradise on earth for musicians, but because when you do play in these places, most of the times you just play for the door, and you end up maybe earning $10 at the end of the show, or even less, or so it depends, but still
it depends on what kind of music you're playing, right?
Yeah, but it depends on many circumstances. For example, when you play during winter time, as you might know, Canadian winters are quite extreme, very, very cold and snowy. And so people tend not to go out as much as they do during summertime. So when you play during wintertime, sometimes there's very few people
audience
in the audience because it's minus 25, and you don't really want to go out in the evening. And
even here it's very cold.
Yeah. But no, it's really. Really interesting, and I think that the most recent interest for Montreal's music scene is totally understandable, and I think there's a lot of interesting musicians and bands.
What about the art galleries and the art space or independent
there's
theater?
It's not bad, but over the years, as I was telling you from a previous conversation, over the years, places that opened maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago have become a little bit more institutionalized in a certain way. So, and so I think there's a little bit less enthusiasm in a certain way nowadays, and all these places that were run in a do-it-yourself way are now more interested in trying to get some public money. So they changed a little bit their way of doing things or their general approach, but still I think it's quite lovely. I mean, in culturally speaking, in general terms, I think there's a lot of stuff going on in Montreal, and it still is a very stimulating place to be.
Vigwang, have you been performing in around that region before?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Going to.
Not yet. Yeah.
You should come.
Yeah.
Quite soon.
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay.
But first, I need to know more about Montreal. That's why. That's why I'm here.
Okay. So it turns out it's an information session about
how
art in Montreal and what's going on and how it works.
Yeah. But how about like cross disciplines? Like, do galleries like also do the screening?
Yeah. It's well, there's a lot of again, you know, this idea of connections and it's quite common to see maybe in Montreal, you know, musicians who are also visual artists or dancers or theater actors who sing in bands, and so there's art galleries who that do present, you know, screenings or concerts, and so there's a and I think it's one of the main reasons behind this effervescence. You know, it's like people moving quite freely from one discipline to the other. You know, it's not as compartmentalized as in other places. So you end up maybe working or collaborating with people from totally different backgrounds, or like, you know, for example, just to give you an example, but Fortner Anderson, who was the director of Videograph, who's originally a poet, and he was one of the main agitators of spoken word scene in Montreal, maybe 20 years ago. He is from the States originally, and he moved to Canada many years ago. But recently, he had been asked to dance in a dance show, in a contemporary dance piece, and you know, he's a man in, you know, Fortner is going to be 60 soon, so and he did it. It was really quite interesting. So the idea was like, you know, what a dance piece could be if the dancers are not dancers, or you know, or they don't have a background as they haven't been brought up as and just to give you an example, and I think it's quite interesting, you know, to do stuff like that, because it opens up all sorts of
dimension
things, you know, because you're a choreographer and you're working with people who don't know anything about contemporary dance. You know, they're not used to, they use their body in a different way, so your own approach as choreographer must be completely different, because you know that, you know, that they won't be able to do this or that, and you have to adapt to. So I think it's an interesting idea, because it opens up all sorts of different possibilities you wouldn't have thought about if you kept working with dancers, you know, for example. But
okay, what else is interesting? What else is interesting in Montreal
Yeah.
beside of the
Food.
culture?
Well, food. Do you want to talk about food?
Okay. Anything,
No, I'm asking you.
anything
Anything.
you think that is very interesting to us?
Well, it's a lively place, and it's I don't know. I mean, there's a general atmosphere, especially yeah. Even though, as I told you before, when we were talking about concerts and stuff, it's a kind of a schizophrenic city because it's totally different from winter time to summertime.
So you mentioned before, like the audience always like to come late for the show.
Oh yeah, what
Same
we're talking
same
about
here in Malaysia.
Yeah, same. I think some attitudes are just
I think it's the same around
It
the world.
doesn't
is it?
matter where are you from. It's that has been a problem for a while. People used to advertise a concert for 9 p.m. and then nothing happened until
And then no one
11
show up.
or yeah. But now I think things are changing a little bit, especially during again winter time when you don't want to go home at 3 a.m. When it's minus 25 outside and yeah.
So the government of Montreal is actually funding all the culture.
Well, on that respect, yeah, you can rely on a few different government bodies. You can there is the Canada Council for the Arts. Then each province has its own arts council. So there's a Quebec Arts Council, and then there's a Montreal Arts Council. So sometimes you can combine, depending on the project you're working on, you can combine money coming from the federal government, from the provincial government, and from the municipal, from the town.
But there's still a lot of like DIY stuff happening, right?
Yeah, I think that it's on one hand it's very helpful because you do have access to
funding.
money, to public money, to funding, and on the other hand you might become dependent on that, meaning that if you don't get any money, well, you forget about the project you're working on and you submit another one that might get some public funding. Also it's sometimes it could be like maybe you have to adapt a little bit the project in order to follow the guidelines of these granting agencies. So sometimes you have to compromise a little bit, but still it's quite effective. It's very easy. It's just a question of getting the right info and filling some papers, and so it's really accessible. In that respect, is really positive. It's something very, very easy to do.
But I think in conclusion, if you want something done, you have to do it yourself, right?
Well, that's what I prefer.
Okay.
To rely, because I still remember when I was 15, I was blown away by the whole punk thing. That's something that I will never forget, and that really influenced me in a very profound way. This idea that you just go out and do it. You don't have to wait for anybody to tell you can do it, you cannot do it, or
just do it.
Yeah, just do it. That's something that still drives me in a general way of speaking. Yeah.
and then I think the time's up.
All
Maybe
right.
next time we have to extend our session longer.
5
All right.
hours.
Okay. Okay. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Fabrizio Gilardino,
Ciao.
Goli Guang, and I'm Panay.
Yeah.
See you again.
See you. Bye.